everyone, my name is Laura. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist and I'm also a mom. And today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about infant food introduction. This is a topic that a lot of people have questions about, and one that I think there's a lot of misinformation about, a lot of information that's not correct. So we want to make sure that those first foods that you're introducing are optimal nutrition choices. The first 2 years of a child's life in terms of what you're feeding them is most important. So we're setting up them for healthy immune system, optimal growth and development those first 2 years. So as much as you can, trying to preserve what's going into their body, making it as pure as possible, you're gonna be setting your child up for success. So this is my little daughter, this is my second child, and I've used this method with my first and had great success with someone who now eats a wide variety of foods, is extremely healthy and vibrant, and I plan to implement the same with her as well. So she just turned 6 months old, so we're gonna be starting to introduce more foods with her, and I hope you'll come along this journey with us. So my philosophy is based on three main principles. One is going to be focusing on what we would call nutrient-dense foods, meaning that there's lots of vitamins and minerals packed in those foods. So not just eating for calories or energy, which is the way we tend to think about eating. We tend to think about just getting something in our bodies to, even out our blood sugar and make us happy. But we want to think about eating for nutrition, and there's a purpose behind the foods that we're choosing. Okay, they're going to nourish the body. The second one is going to be on whole unprocessed foods, meaning that not a lot has been done to it before you eat it. Man hasn't taken a bunch of different ingredients and put them together. It's just the food in its pure form. That's going to be the most nutritious, the most nutrient dense, and it's also going to teach your child to eat real foods and to eat a wide variety of foods rather than always relying on sugars and salts and those additives that are in processed foods. The third thing is going to be preventing picky eating, and I know that's a topic that a lot of toddler moms and even moms of older children end up coming around to. A lot of times when you introduce foods to your child in the first year, it's, oh, you love vegetables, you love fruits, and then the food preferences maybe start to change around age 1.5 to 2. And what happened to my child? They ate all these wonderful things. What we want to do is teach you how to introduce foods in a way that your child is going to have such a great foundation that even when they do go off to school and are exposed to a lot more cultural foods, processed foods, that they're still going to be preferring or enjoying a nutrient-dense diet, and that's kind of the goal. So the first question is, when is my child ready to have food? So the recommendation is really 6 months. At 6 months of age, your baby is ready to receive some solid food. So there's a little bit of misinformation there. The American Academy of Pediatrics and a lot of pediatricians go off this recommendation is 4 to 6 months for food introduction. And your pediatrician might even say to you around 4 months, well, you can start, giving them a little food here and there as a, to play with or to test it out. And some people might even say, well, my child is grabbing for food. Are they ready? Really, the answer to that is 6 months is going to be ideal. So the World Health Organization actually recommends exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life and then starting to introduce complementary foods at 6 months. Now, if your child is formula fed or a mixture of breast milk and formula, that's still the case. So 6 months is going to be ideal. I have noticed that some formula-fed babies might start needing food a little bit earlier or seeming like they prefer food earlier. Not sure the mechanism behind that, if there's something nutritionally that they're not getting that they are desiring from food. Maybe that's the case, so you can use your discretion on that. But if your child is exclusively breastfed or even mixed feeding, I would recommend waiting for that 6 month. The reason is that when an infant is born and up till about 6 months and even after that, their gut is more permeable, so their intestinal tract is more permeable, meaning that anything you put into it is going to get into their system, okay? So there's a higher risk of developing food allergies with the earlier introduction of foods. Now, that doesn't mean if you introduce at 4 months, your child's going to get allergies, and that doesn't mean that if you wait until 6 months, your child is not going to get allergies. It just puts you at a little bit higher risk. So you want to preserve that intestinal tract and just allow those easily digested breast milk proteins to get through for about 6 months, okay? Another sign that we have is that child is sitting up properly. So baby's sitting up, has good head neck control. When I put my mouth up to her, she's able to receive a spoon or to receive food. She's not going to choke because she can't control her neck. And usually sitting up on their own happens around 5.5 to 6 months. So when your child is at that stage, you kind of know that they're showing you signs that they are ready to have food too. You're ready, aren't you? She says, I'm ready to go. All right, so what else happens at 6 months is that your milk feedings kind of top off in terms of what the baby can sustain on. So they are taking in basically the maximum amount of milk that they're going to be taking in, and they need then food on top of that. So what you don't want to do is say, oh, they're eating food now, I'm going to decrease my feedings. No, they should still continue, especially for the first several months after you introduce food. Still continue feeding the same amount per day, the same amount of breast milk or formula, and then the complementary foods are adding to that, so giving them those additional calories and nutrients that they need, okay? So baby's ready. The next question is what to introduce. So in history, rice cereal was kind of the go-to. And the reason for that is because rice is a low allergen, so there was a lower risk of an allergic reaction. And then iron was fortified into rice cereal. So actually iron is a very mineral poor food. It doesn't have a lot of minerals. It doesn't have really any iron in it. So they add iron to it. Now, if we kind of take a step back and look at this, throughout history, that's a food that came into existence as a result of the processed food era. It's not a naturally occurring food, iron fortified rice cereal. It just doesn't really make sense that the first food you would be introducing is a processed food, right? So that's basically setting you up for a life of processed foods, which we know are contributing to chronic disease, immune dysfunction, etc. So we don't really want that. There's also been reports of rice cereal being high in arsenic, which is common that rice is contaminated with arsenic. So that's obviously something you don't want to be putting into your infant's body either. So it's a very nutrient poor food. Grains are also not the first ideal food, especially for the first several months of food introduction. I'd argue, waiting so closer to 1.5, 2 years to really doing more grains, because babies don't have those enzymes really to efficiently break down the food, the amylase enzymes. So what we want to do is get the foods that they already know how to digest. So fats are really important for brain development, okay? So baby is used to having a lot of fat. Breast milk is 50 to 55% fat. They're still gonna be getting a lot of fat from their feedings, milk feedings, and then you wanna introduce foods on top of that that have a lot of fat, but also a lot of minerals. So we said that iron is something that their stores start depleting. The stores that they obtained during when you were pregnant are starting to deplete around 6 months of age. So we want to give them foods that contain iron. Okay, that's going to be important for brain development, cognitive development. Zinc is another one that's going to be important. Calcium. Okay, so all these minerals are going to be really important. The best foods for that are honestly going to be meat foods, animal foods. Okay, so what I'm going to start with, and what I started with my other daughter, was bone broth. I'm going to recommend that you make the bone broth. You can buy it, but it's very easy to make, and you will make so much of it by just making one batch. You can freeze it. So what I do is I just put it in these little individual cube containers, and then you can just take a couple out at a time and thaw them. You can use it to mix in with other foods. But that's a really easy way to preserve it. So I have a recipe on my blog, how to make bone broth, so you can check that out at thegreenburger.com. But that's going to give you a great first start. There's iron, there's calcium, there's zinc, there's collagen. It's a great gut food, so super nutrient dense. Remember, baby can't eat a lot at once. Quantity is small, so we need to start getting them foods that have the most vitamins and minerals. So that's an excellent source right there. Okay. We don't need to be introducing sweet stuff right away. Babies naturally have a preference for sweet foods, so you don't have to get them used to that. We want to really play up those savory flavors so that they can start getting used to those. Okay. So scheduling, you don't want to introduce anything too much at once, and you don't want to introduce a variety of foods. It's all right, baby. So what we want to do is just a teaspoon at a time, maybe an hour or so after a first breast milk feeding, so that the baby's not starving, but that they're not full either. You want them to accept the food, but if they're really hungry, they're going to be too upset to take anything. So the first couple weeks, you want to go ahead and introduce just the basic like bone broth type of food, okay? And then in my subsequent videos, I will show you what other foods we can introduce, especially if you don't want to go with bone broth as your first option. But you want to wait a couple days before introducing a new food. So do the bone broth for a couple days, and then allow them to make sure there's no reactions, so no allergic reactions or adverse gas reactions, that they're tolerating the food okay, and then you can move on to a new food, okay? So it sounds like Adeline's getting hungry here, so we're gonna give her a little bite of this bone broth. If we can get her little bib that she threw on the floor. Yeah. Snap you up there. Okay. So they're gonna wanna grab with the spoon, they're gonna wanna say, what's that? Now remember, the first couple times you introduce food, you really just wanna start getting them used to food and eating and flavors. It's not about how much they're eating, it's more about the process. Okay, so kind of letting them explore it and say, ooh, what's that? So I just heated this up on the stove. I'd recommend that over the microwave. It literally takes 0.5 seconds because there's so little that they eat at once. So just a teaspoon at a time, just getting them used to it, okay? And the interesting thing about kids, and I'll talk about this a lot in my other videos, is that they really eat to their nutritional needs. So if you take away the processed foods, then you will find that they really crave those whole nutrient-dense foods because their body needs it. But when you start giving sugar and starches and salts that are added and processed fats, it confuses their body as to what it really needs. And that's where you get a lot of that picky eating. So we're giving her a really nutrient-dense food that her body is just gonna love, okay? So it's high in fat too, and she's gonna like that. All right, so just kind of letting her guide the process. Again, waiting a couple days before we introduce a different food, just to make sure that her body is tolerating this okay, okay? So again, baby's 6 months old, she's ready for food, and we'll just keep going from here, okay? So check out my other videos. We're going to be going through this process with you. I'm going to hit on a couple other first foods that you can introduce and just keeping it moving. So once she starts eating, we're going to do this about 1 time a day, right, in the morning-ish time, and then we'll increase from there, okay? So thanks, guys, for watching. Here she goes. Is that good?